4 of them went to Corfu for a week. By 4, I mean my wife Kirsty and her 3 best friends from school, Laura, Jane, and Shauna. They were inseparable and always tried to organize a couple of short trips together every year. I didn't mind, as I made up for it with a couple of weekends devoted to golf. A whole week was unusual, but the trip was spontaneous and cheaper than some of their weekends away. They booked their tickets at the last minute and flew out on Monday, planning to return the following Sunday. So there I was, Mark, left alone with our 15-year-old son Jake and 8-year-old daughter Chloe. It's not that I can't cook, but Kirsty left ready meals for the whole week in case I poisoned the kids. The week started well, with both parents helping each other out. I juggled work with school runs, sports, and dance classes. I was doing pretty well as a house husband, thanks in part to Kirsty's instructions, which she had left on sticky notes on the washing machine. Kirsty called a few times, mostly to check that I hadn't caused any irreparable damage, but also to remind the kids that she missed them and loved us all. A week passed, and I waited for the girls at the airport with John and Tony, Sean, and Jane's husbands. Laura was still alone. The kids were still absorbed in their gadgets, and I already trusted Jake to watch Chloe for a short time. I saw Sean and Jane coming out of the arrivals area. They looked tired, and Laura was behind them, but Kirsty was nowhere to be seen. While I was looking for her, the other girls' greetings seemed a little subdued. Laura asked if I had received a letter from Kirsty. I had no idea what she was talking about. The girls exchanged cautious glances when Laura said that Kirsty had sent a letter that I should read, explaining why she hadn't come home. I immediately thought that she must be ill or had been in an accident, and asked if she was all right. They assured me that she was fine, but she had decided to stay with friends for a couple of days. My next barrage of questions didn't get me any clear answers. I left the airport feeling anxious and humiliated. When I got home, I eagerly turned on my computer. The letter had arrived right after I left for the airport. There was nothing in it except what Laura had said. Only that she had met up with friends, had the opportunity to take a short trip on a yacht, and had decided to stay for a few days to do so. She hoped everything was fine and that the children were getting used to my cooking. And at the end of the letter, she wrote that she loved us and would be home soon. I couldn't understand the letter. Why hadn't she called to say she was staying longer? Then I remembered that she hadn't called in the last 2 days. And who were these friends? I couldn't think of anyone it could be. I called her cell phone, but it went to voicemail. I left a short, concise message. Please call me. Maybe she was at sea and didn't have reception, but I had a very uneasy feeling. I tried calling several times, but no one answered. Then I started calling her 3 friends. They must have known something. It was John, Sean's husband, who said I should come to their house at 9 p.m. When I arrived, all the other girls were there, as well as Tony, and the atmosphere seemed tense. John started the conversation. Mark needs to know what happened. Tell him everything, Sean. Last night, we met some guys at a pool party in the marina and went back to their place to drink. It was just a party. Kirsty started talking to the host, a guy named Samuel. Tony interrupted her. According to Jane, it was more than that. There was kissing and fondling. They were all having fun on some rich bastard's yacht. Sean shot Jane a murderous look, and Laura spoke up. It wasn't like that. A few guys were trying to hit on us, but we turned them down, and when they got too pushy, we left. Well, we left, but Kirsty stayed. Damn! The word slipped out before I could stop myself. I tried to convince her to come with us, but she was determined to stay. Shona joined the conversation. They didn't do anything, Mark. They were just talking. I guess she went back to your rooms. The silence gave me my answer. She came back at lunchtime today and announced that she was staying for a few days, packed her things, and left. We all yelled and screamed at her, but she was determined to leave. We don't understand what happened to her, but we couldn't talk her out of it. So she stayed there with some millionaire? I think so, was the most useful answer I got. Many more words were spoken, but we were all going around in circles. The children were furious, and I was completely baffled. This was so unlike her. It just didn't make sense. I drove home like a robot, put the kids to bed, and collapsed on the bed, exhausted, unable to sleep. My world had fallen apart. The next morning, I woke up late and rushed to get the kids ready for school, make their lunches, and drive them there. I was late for work and missed the beginning of a meeting with a client, which really upset my boss. I still hadn't heard from Kirsty. The day at work was crazy, and I was late picking up Chloe. Luckily, Sean, Jane, and their kids stayed with her at the school playground. They saw how upset I was and offered to help with the kids for the rest of the week. They asked about the letter from Kirsty, and I told them there was nothing special in it and that I still didn't know anything. Finally, on Monday evening, Kirsty called me. She started by apologizing for not calling, saying she had no signal. Without pausing, she told me about the opportunity to go sailing with her friends and that it was too good an offer to turn down. I let her finish, then said, "So you're staying with Samuel on his yacht?" There was a deafening silence. "Mark, it's not what you think. I think you're having fun with a millionaire. You left your husband, humiliated me in front of my friends, and didn't have the decency to contact your children. It's only for a few days. I'll be back on Thursday. Don't bother coming back." I hung up. What a bitch. The phone rang again and again, but I didn't answer. A text message came. "I'm sorry, the first flight is tomorrow at 3 p.m. We need to talk. Tell the kids I love them." My anger reached a new peak. We need to talk and tell the kids that I love them after she ignored them. She must be joking. The next day, I asked her parents to look after the kids. They were shocked by her behavior, but asked me to hear her side of the story before making any decisions. The kids started asking questions, too. I wasn't going to take her back. She brought her suitcase at 8 p.m. I didn't say anything and just stared at her. "I'm sorry, Mark. I didn't think it was a chance to get away from everything, and I took it. I didn't think about how it would look. You probably think I'm an idiot. You stayed on his yacht even though the others asked you to come back to the hotel with them. He was nice. We were just talking." Enough, Kirsty. You can't abandon your family just to chat with someone nice. You spent 3 days just chatting? Yes, mostly I didn't sleep with him. I don't believe you. Even if it's true, you still left me for another man. I didn't leave you. I just had the opportunity to go on a free trip, and there were other people there. Samuel was a real gentleman, a very generous host, and a good listener. And I guess I don't listen to you. No, that's not true. You do listen. It was like an escape from our normal life, like I could choose anything and be free. Our life was a little stuck, a little boring. You must be joking. This is the life you dreamed of. Children and a house. You're the one who stopped traveling and gave up most of our activities. You wanted a big house and to save money. The kids were too young to travel. You couldn't take time off work. There were always excuses. Is that true, or did you just get a chance to sleep with a millionaire? I don't know, Mark. I just felt different there. We got along so well, and I think there was a connection between us. Oh, wonderful! Did you fall in love with him, or was it just passion? I noticed the wording of her answer. Never slept with him, but slept with him probably. Finally, she nodded and tears filled her eyes. How sweet. Did you kiss and hug? Another nod and more tears. I had to leave before my head exploded. You need to go to the kids. They're at your mom's. I hope you can explain this to them better than I can. I ran out of the house, hearing Kirsty calling me. I stayed in the pub for about an hour until Tony found me. He bought me a beer and sat down next to me. Sorry, buddy, you're wanted. Kirsty called Laura, and everyone's looking for you. He called several times to say he'd found me, and shortly after that, John arrived. If it's any consolation, the girls are furious with her, too. Because of what she's done, they're in deep shit. We're unhappy with our wives and are still asking questions and comparing answers to see if there's something more to it. I asked if there was anything new, but they said it didn't look like it. What do you want to do? I have no idea. It looks like she's fallen in love with this jerk and gone off into some romantic world. At that moment, my phone rang. Please come home. We need to talk. No, I don't want to go back, and you shouldn't either, I said and hung up. The phone rang again, and I turned it off. Kirsty. It was well past midnight when Tony helped Mark back into the house. I had never seen him so drunk. I tried to help, but Mark looked at me with pure contempt. Tony put him to bed, and he fell asleep immediately. I had just started to thank Tony for his help when he interrupted me. What are you doing to him, Kirsty? Not only did he not come home, but now he thinks you're in love with some guy. He deserves better. It's just cruel. Decide what the hell you want and stop torturing him with another guy. With that, Tony stormed out of the room. I looked at Mark and felt very upset. Tony was right. He didn't deserve this. I was being selfish. He hardly moved as I undressed him and put him to bed, leaving a bowl, a glass of water, and 2 aspirin tablets. I was completely confused. Mark was such a good man and a great father, and I was hurting him. I still loved him and couldn't explain my actions with Samuel. Maybe it was because Samuel saw and talked to me, not Kirsty, his wife or mother. He made me feel special. In any case, I needed to forget about all this and get back to being a good wife and mother. At that moment, I received a message. Are you okay? It was Samuel, and I ignored him. In fact, I was far from okay. I had hurt people I loved. Besides Mark, I had to make amends to Jake and Chloe, who knew something was wrong. And then there were my friends, whom I had put in an awkward position. The disappointed looks on my parents' faces when I picked up the kids were devastating. The next morning I tried to talk to Mark, but he wasn't interested and seemed annoyed that I had seen him drunk. His only words were, "Don't worry, it won't happen again." He left for work looking terrible, and I started getting the kids ready for school. That was the beginning of my attempt to return to normal life. Over the next few days, I received several more messages from Samuel saying he was worried and asking if I was okay. It was difficult for me to respond. Days passed, and I couldn't get through to Mark. We only talked about practical things and tried to keep up the appearance of a normal life for the children, but I felt terrible. I started crying again when the phone rang. I answered without looking, and it was Samuel. When he heard how things were and how upset I was, I had a hard time keeping him from coming to get me. I repeated the conversation we had had on the day I returned, telling him how much I loved my husband and children and that I had to go back. Then I told him about all the pain we had caused each other. He said he was lonely and missed me. I felt the same way, even though I was living in a house full of people. He asked if he could see me to make sure I was okay. I refused, but he kept asking, saying he would book a room at a nearby hotel and begging me to meet him. Samuel kept writing and calling, and eventually I agreed to meet him for lunch while the children were at school and Mark was at work. He hadn't changed and was so concerned about me. It was a relief to have someone I could talk to. We talked easily, and I felt better for the first time in weeks. I agreed to meet him again the following week. The further Mark traveled, the closer Samuel became. He was so caring and attentive, apologizing for the trouble he had caused me. It was so good to see him, he seemed like my only friend. On our 4th date after dinner, I went to his room, and we made love for the first time. I was overwhelmed with emotion. It was amazing. It wasn't that Samuel was better than Mark, it was just new and exciting. Plus, I hadn't had sex since I left the girls, and that made it even more intense. Samuel was ecstatic, saying it was an honor to be with me. After that, we hugged and made love again, but it wasn't like it was with Mark. I felt free and able to open up. I got home late and found Mark asleep in Chloe's room under the covers. They had both fallen asleep reading a bedtime story. I felt terrible. I gently woke him up and moved him into our bed, and he quickly fell asleep. I lay down next to him and fell asleep in tears. I wanted so much to take care of Mark, but I thought I was in love with Samuel. Everything was so confusing, and I was in a terrible position. I tried to think about what would be best for Mark. If I really loved him, then it would be better to just leave. Was I trying to protect Mark, or was I just being a coward? I missed his advice. He always knew the right thing to do. I arranged another date with Samuel, this time for dinner, and I wanted it to be special. The kids were at my mom's, and Mark was out with his friends for the night. I found my little black dress, high heels, and bought stockings. Dinner was wonderful. We talked about running away and maybe getting a divorce. He had money, so that wasn't a problem, and he could help with the custody lawyers. When I told him I couldn't leave because of the children in school, he immediately offered to find something nearby so we could be together. The sex was amazing. It was a complete escape from my ordinary and now depressing life. I came home at midnight and was stunned to see Mark's car in the driveway. When I walked in, he was holding a bag of stockings. "Is this him?" I couldn't deny it, nodding through my tears. "This is hardly just friendship. You dress up for sex." "How nice that you never offered me that. Look at what you always said, that I was enough for you without expensive makeup and lingerie, and that you needed to feel comfortable. He gets more from you than I ever did." I couldn't say anything. I didn't understand why I hadn't done that for Mark. Maybe it was because of power or control in the marriage, or because I was a wife and mother, not a lover. "Do you think our whole marriage is boring, or just our sex life? Do you do other things with him that you wouldn't do for me?" "That's not it, Mark. I can't explain it. You're not boring at all." I really couldn't explain it. Mark had always wanted more sexual adventure, but I held him back and rejected his advances. "That's the difference between us. We're comfortable, and he's excited. You try, but not for us. How much effort did you put into flirting and dinners?" I didn't like the truth in his words. Now it seemed so smug and stupid. If I had tried harder, maybe I wouldn't have looked for someone else. There wasn't much difference between Mark and Samuel. The difference was in me and how I behaved with them. I stammered an apology and ran to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I expected Mark to break down the door and throw me out, but he didn't. It was a complete disaster. In a panic, I called Samuel. After making sure I was safe, he told me to leave and come to him. I decided that my life was now purgatory and that Samuel was my only way out. The next morning, I found Mark in the kitchen. He had slept in the guest room. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I ruined our relationship and I can't fix it. I think we need to break up. I need time to find myself, to figure out what I want." Mark understood immediately. "It's because of him, isn't it? You're leaving me for him. Have you been talking to him all this time?" I sighed. "Yes, for some time now. I need to sort out my feelings for him and for you. For both of you." "Yes, but you're going to figure it out in his bed, so the decision has already been made." "That's not true. I love you, but I've messed everything up and I'm very confused about my feelings. I need to understand what he really means to me." "Well, you can tell the kids. I don't know how to explain your actions to them." "I'll tell them it's a short vacation. Don't be silly, they'll wait for you." "But I can come back." Mark looked at her suspiciously. "Why do you think it's your decision? There's no way in the world I'm going to let you leave tomorrow and never come back." "What about the children and school?" "Are you serious? You've ruined our lives and now you think that's important? I'll figure something out as I always do, and you go off on your merry adventure. Go find yourself." I was in despair. It had never occurred to me that Mark could take away my right to make decisions. His last words were, "Tell your family and friends the truth. I won't lie for you." The next day I left, hurriedly packing my things. I felt like I was doing the wrong thing, that I was making a mistake, but I had burned all my bridges with Mark, and Samuel was so happy that I was going to him. I looked around the house one last time. Mark was right. It was my idea, and I loved this place, even if I got it back after the divorce I had destroyed our happy home. I told the children that it was a temporary separation. They weren't shocked. They knew something was going on. It was much harder to tell my parents. My mother just cried and begged me not to do it, and my father could barely look at me, shaking his head. I drove to Samuel's hotel. I usually felt better when I was with him, but not this time. We stayed there for a couple of days, and then he suggested we leave. We went back to his yacht in Corfu for a couple of weeks. The sex was great, but I missed my children and home. I slept poorly and, of course, felt guilty. I often thought about what Mark was doing and how he was coping. We made a plan for the divorce. Samuel found lawyers who contacted Mark, and we found a luxurious apartment near the schools where we could stay until the divorce and house issues were settled. I tried to call my friends, but they weren't interested. Jane and Shauna were still in unstable marriages and didn't want to see Samuel or talk to me. Shauna summed it up. "We're going to support Mark and the kids during this difficult time. You'd be better off staying away." I was furious because they were my lifelong friends, not Mark's. Laura, my best friend, was even worse. She couldn't accept that I had left a man like Mark. I was furious. When the kids mentioned the next neighborhood barbecue, I insisted that we go with Samuel. I had just as much right to be there as Mark did. When we arrived, everyone was already there, including Mark and the kids. Jane immediately asked us to leave. "So much for friendship. I broke up with Mark, not everyone else." Jane didn't waste any time responding. "Maybe for Kirsty, but do you really want to rub it in your family's face that you abandoned them and moved here with your new boyfriend?" Samuel tried to pull me away. Mark and most of the others just stood there in shock. Jake brought me to my senses. "Go on, Mom, you're upsetting Chloe." I turned around in horror and saw Chloe crying, running to Mark, throwing herself at his knees and hiding her little face in his chest. Everyone else was looking at me. I let Samuel lead me away. I was so upset that I felt like I was losing everyone, not just Mark. Mark. She wasted no time and filed for divorce. I was afraid of losing my children and friends. God, I would have become one of those fathers who only see their children on weekends, gradually losing touch with them, desperately trying to find ways to entertain them so they wouldn't have to go back to my dreary apartment. I'd heard all those horror stories, and her new husband was rich enough to bury me legally and impress the kids. I dreaded hearing about one of the kids going on his damn yacht for the first time. Fortunately, Tony and John were good friends, and to my surprise, Laura, Sean, and Jane were fantastic, helping with the kids, even bringing food and visiting me to see how I was doing. The divorce went smoothly. Financially, it was simple, 50-50. But the children were a sticking point. Kirsty wanted primary custody and to live with them in the house. They were happy to buy out my share. The money for her new man didn't matter. Her lawyers were so arrogant that they expected me to accept their offer and be grateful. The situation changed when my lawyer pointed out that Kirsty had effectively abandoned the children for an extended vacation. Then she abandoned them again, taking Samuel away for several weeks on her yacht. They tried to prove that she knew the children were being cared for. My lawyer agreed, adding, they were being cared for by their primary caregiver and the only constant person in their lives. Furthermore, Jake insists on living with his father, and Chloe has decided to stay with Jake. I didn't tell the children what to say. I was very proud of how Jake took care of Chloe throughout this whole sad process. I tried to shield them from the worst of it, but I couldn't protect them completely. They spent a lot of time with Tony and John's children, which was very good for them. There was a separate apartment in Tony's house where we often stayed overnight. The children always had a great time and found the familiar surroundings and closeness of their friends very helpful. His lawyers must have been concerned because the next proposal was for joint custody. I considered going to court for sole custody, but it was risky, and it was better for the children if we could agree on a compromise. In the end, we agreed that the children would spend a week with each of us. I would pick them up on Wednesday evening and keep them with me if it was my weekend. I also insisted that either of us could take them to school and sports activities. Kirsty wasn't happy with that, so I knew I would have more opportunities, and I really enjoyed being involved in their lives. The house became a sticking point. I refused their offer to buy out my share and insisted on selling. I think Samuel was happy, but I knew it would upset Kirsty, and that was a shame. No, really a shame. Honestly. I wasn't worried about where to live, as Tony offered us a place to stay in his annex for a minimal fee for as long as we wanted. It was much less than our previous mortgage, and I decided I could spend the money on other things until we decided where to settle down permanently. On the day we were supposed to sign the divorce papers, Kirsty came to see me. She reminisced about the past and how good we had been together. I told her that it wouldn't help either of us. Then she said something unexpected. Maybe we shouldn't do this. I was losing my patience. You're the one who left our marriage and rushed into a divorce, and now you're not sure. Are you out of your mind? Maybe. I left because I thought you would never forgive me for what I did. I made a mistake and only made things worse. What's the matter? Isn't everything going well with your new man? He's not you. I miss us and our life together. A picture of a happy life with Kirsty flashed before my eyes, including everything we had planned and talked about. But it wasn't real. She wasn't who I thought she was. Superficial was the first word that came to mind. Just sign the papers and leave, Kirsty. I returned to the pub to celebrate the divorce with my friends when John said, "We're happy to get drunk with you, but maybe we should do something more constructive. What do you want? What do you know about life, about the big world, about the meaning of life and all that?" Wow, that was deep for John. I had no idea, but it occurred to me that I might have options, ambitions, that I could do what I loved. The kids were a priority, of course, but maybe I could do something else besides just surviving. Back when I didn't have kids, I had free time. I started biking, running, and hiking again, and began to feel better. Being dumped by a woman for another man was a huge blow to my self-esteem. Playing sports I loved helped me lose weight and regain my confidence. My kids even started joining me. Shona tried to set me up with someone, but I wasn't ready, and was definitely afraid of a new relationship. I was afraid to start all over again with someone new. Shona and Jane often invited us over for dinner with their families, and Laura brought us food every Thursday. The kids were grateful. I was doing most of the housework. But my cooking took some getting used to, although I was gradually getting better. I asked Jane why they were so kind to me, since they were closer to Kirsty than to me.